Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Tammy Bennett. I'm a doctor of Oriental medicine, and my show is called A Modern Healer's Journey. I'm talking today with Kelli Hastings, who is also known as the yoga lawyer. I wanted to ask you, Kelli, about what inspired your book title, which is called
Rotten Minerva. I mean, the full title is Rotten Minerva, Be an Unruly Warrior and Embark on a Spiritual Quest, but Rotten Minerva for short. And my grandmother inspired the title because she used to write stories about a young heroine named Minerva. And it was, she was always kind of getting into trouble, but had a good heart. And it was Rotten Minerva. She would use it to teach me life lessons. But there's, multiple layers of symbolism because Minerva is the goddess of war and wisdom. And then life is a little rotten. It's not all love and light when you embark on the spiritual path. And it's okay to have, some unruly tendencies or negative tendencies that you bring with you. It's part of the full gambit of living this life. You have to have both the darkness and the light. You can't get rid of one for the other.
Yeah, that's the whole yin yang symbol.
Yes. Yeah. Which is very prominent in Oriental medicine for sure. Yeah.
It's interesting because when I started reading the book, I started highlighting like crazy, and I couldn't figure out. I wanted to talk about so many things, and I have time constraints. We could do a deep dive another time, but I was really taken aback by your balls to go and just go off to India. So tell me about the whole, what was in your mind before, why you decided to up and go. And if I remember correctly in the book, the first time you went, was your son born yet? Or was it the second time?
Yes. So he came with me all three times, and he was not even 2 years old the first time. We took 3 trips over the course of about 3 years. And the last trip he was almost 5. Okay. So he started at 1.5, almost 2. And then the last trip he was 4.5-ish. So very young. Every time.
So what made you say, I'm going to India?
Well, it's not as crazy as it seems because I was deeply involved in this yoga practice, Ashtanga yoga, and my teacher would take regular trips to India. She at the time was taking trips almost every year. So I had kind of an in. She's like, you should come with me. I'm going to go to India. But it's because the style of yoga that we practice originates in this small town in Karnataka, one of the southern states of India. So we went to Mysore. That's where they host this yoga.
Got it. And so tell me, then let's go backwards in time and tell me how you got into yoga practice at first.
Well, yeah, let's see. At the time my brother was very sick. He had Hodgkin's lymphoma, and this was maybe 2007. I started getting into yoga in 2009. So I was searching for answers, basically. I'd studied religion in college. Even though I majored in math, I had enough credits for a dual major in religion. I was very into just studying spirituality and religion. And I did study some yoga in college, not the physical postures. Yoga is so much bigger than that. But we read Autobiography of a Yogi, which is this great story of the spiritual yoga path. And so my interest was piqued. And then when my brother got sick, I just started looking inward for answers, and that's what brought me to yoga.
I think that sounds very similar to what a lot of I've seen over 10,000 patients in my lifetime as a healer and a practitioner of Oriental medicine. And I talk to a lot of people because the nature of what I do, the initial part of what I do is to listen and pay attention and understand them from a physical, emotional, and spiritual standpoint. I think a lot of people don't realize that aspect of traditional Oriental medicine, and we have to be really good listeners. And I hear people say, I'm searching inward. I'm looking for answers. That looking for answers comes up all the time. And that's why I was hoping that you could share that with other people, what your journey was. So that first trip to India, what was it like? What was it like when your feet hit the ground, and what were your senses like? How did that all play out for you?
I mean, it's a bit of culture shock. Traveling in general, for people who travel, that it takes you out of your comfort zone, and it's a lot more present moment awareness when you're traveling because you're not used to the environment. So it immediately brings you into a more meditative state, in my experience. And India was like that on overload because it was such a cultural shock, a cultural difference from what we're used to in the West. so immediately you're just in the moment because you're overwhelmed by how different everything is. So you're not in your
Well, and
head.
then you've got a
So
baby
just
with you.
yeah, and I've got a baby that I'm worried about. Yeah, totally. So it immediately brings you into the present moment, which is, where meditation, where yoga happens.
Got it. And when did you first, obviously you checked into a hotel and so on and so forth. Did you then,
Not exactly.
well, did you stay at a yoga retreat? I mean, what was your...
No. I stayed with my first trip, I stayed at a family, like with a Brahmin class family. I rented a room in their house. And then my second and third trip, I rented my own apartment. We stayed for 2 months each time. Okay. So we rented a place.
Okay, that was a whole lot easier. So define Brahmin for the folks out there. What Brahmin means.
So it's like the priestly class in India. There used to be this caste system in India. It doesn't exist anymore, but there is still the remnants of it a little bit. And so it was a family that engaged in Brahmin religious practices, and they were a higher income type family. They had a really nice big house, and they rented a room out of it to yoga students. And I took advantage of that. I think there actually had maybe 2 rooms, because I remember there were 1 or 2 other yoga students there too.
Okay. So there was a part in your book where you talk about a man with no legs who is smiling all the time, and you write really beautifully about that. But could you share the heartfelt experience that you had with that situation?
Yeah, it was just kind of a metaphor of like how India is in a lot of ways, where they're just so much more appreciative of everything, it seems like, because they have less maybe, and maybe not everywhere in India, but where we were, there was this coconut stand, and the yogis after practice would go and get coconut water there. So it would be kind of a hangout spot. And every day there was this man there, no legs. He had 2 bricks that he used to walk on his hands, like no wheelchair or anything. Happiest smile on his face every day. So happy. And I'm like, why is this guy so happy? Like, look at him. He's like just sitting in the dirt at the coconut stand. But it just makes you realize that there's more to life than all this material crap that we think is so important in the West, and that they had attained an inner peace and happiness that eluded me at the time. Did
it hit you that hard at the moment, or did it take a little while for that to process in your brain?
He was more of a symbol for everything that was happening and my brain was processing, because it wasn't just him, but he was such a good metaphor for it, because it was so just looking at him, it was like, why is he so happy? But it wasn't just him, it was everybody. Like, time is just different there too. They're not in a rush, and they just see life as divine. It's completely intertwined with their life. Like, there is no Hinduism in India. That's what Westerners call their religion. It's just a part of their life. It's completely integrated into their culture and everything. So they don't see it as separate, and they see the divine in everything. And they're not so concerned with like the fast-paced capitalist lifestyle that we have in the West.
So knowing that, and then the next thing in my head that struck me in the book that I wanted to ask you about, because the man with the no legs really hit me. I had an experience not that long ago where I was driving down one of our main thoroughfares here, 1792, and was making a left turn. Yeah. And there was a guy panhandling, and he had this sign, and it said, no drinking, no drugs, married 40 years, have a home, had heart surgery, need help. Here's my PayPal account. And it was weird because the panhandling situation here in Florida is pretty interesting because it's a lot of it, and it's not like that. I mean, there's not, long dissertation on a sign and all this information, but he was smiling, like big smile, like smiling, not to try to draw people. I think he was just genuinely happy that he was alive. Like he was happy to be alive. He maybe had a heart transplant. I don't know the deal. I wanted to go back and talk to him, and he wasn't there a couple hours later. So I'd like to track him down and figure that out. But I thought about that when you talked about that in your book. And then you talked about getting hugs from, is it Amma?
Yes. Yeah. Amma, the hugging saint. Yes, I met her the first time in India too, but she comes to the US, or she did before COVID. And her darshan, that's the yoga word for divine beholding. And it's just when spiritual teachers will kind of reach out to the public and allow people to come and be in their presence. And so she gives hugs as her darshan. So thousands of people will come and line up for hours, and she just hugs each one. That's her practice. And she's a spiritual teacher in India, and I had an amazing experience. She came to Mysore, which is the town in India, that's my second trip. And I was very drawn to go see her. I kept seeing pictures of her, and I was like, I'm going to go do this. And we waited. I brought my son. He was, I think, 2.5 at the time. And we waited 16 hours or something crazy to get our Amma hug. But when she came to America, it was a lot more fast paced. You know, they had it set up a lot more streamlined, but she gave out free food, everybody that was there, and everybody got a hug. And it was a very uplifting and spiritual experience. Like, you could feel the energy of it, and it was life-changing for me to get my Amma hug.
The other day we were talking about your energy. You were here having acupuncture, and we were talking about kidney energy. Did you experience the same feeling, the physical feeling, when you touched her as you did similarly with acupuncture? Can you even describe it? I know that's a really tough question to ask.
No. I mean, you know, there's subtle energies that you can feel if you're open to it. And for her, it was more like a whole body upliftment. And, you know, there's a lot of little coincidental things that happened where you just feel like the universe is there with you and in on the joke, you know, type of thing, where you're like little things just for you. Like, for example, my son was very young, and, you know, I'm trying to convince him to wait all this time for this hug from this woman. And so he's like, well, why are we here? And I was telling him, well, Amma helps people. You know, if you need something, you can ask for it and pray to her, and then you might get it. And he's like, oh, like Santa Claus. And I was like, yeah, kind of like Santa Claus. He's like, so we're going to get presents. And I was like, no, I don't, maybe. So I was like, oh crap, we're going to get this hug, and he's expecting a present. And so he went up with me, and we got the hug. And then, you know, it was just very like all body release of energy. And I was starting to tear up and felt like I was going to cry. Like, she hugged us for like a good minute. We went up together, and then we got up and we're walking away, and she's like, here. And she hands us a little present, and he's like, presents. It was just like a little bag, and it had like candy and flowers in it. So he got his Amma present, and that felt like a huge coincidence, you know, like she was somehow new, or the universe through her answered his wish for that.
More non-coincidence, as you and I talked about before.
There's all coincidences are meaningful. I feel like there's no, you know, unmeaningful coincidences.
So he sounds like a really special person. He's how old now?
He's 12 now. He's 12. Yeah.
And I know he practices martial arts.
Yes, we both do.
How does that, so some people will have a disconnect as far as like martial arts, yoga, and yoga practice and prayer, and how all that, you know, like fist violence or kicking and things like that kind of come out of all that. Can you speak to that briefly? Because I want people to understand a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, and lawyering is a big dichotomy too with yoga, maybe. But here's the thing, yoga is everything, you know, and everything can be a yoga. There's actually a lot of similarities with ancient martial arts practice and ancient yoga practice, you know, like focus on the breath, being in the present moment. So I find a lot of that in there, but nothing is excluded from yoga practice. You know, yoga means union, or being in that state where your body, mind, and soul are unified, and your thoughts are calm. And so you can bring that presence into any activity.
So how does that apply to law at this point in your life? Do you walk in, you get your Zen, you feel the room, how does that all work?
Yeah, I do.
I'm taking television lawyer and real lawyer and mushing it up in my head. So give me the real scoop.
No, I mean, that is part of it when you're a yogi, and you can be a yoga anything, you know, yoga doctor, yoga bus driver. Like, we need more yoga in every profession. So it's a little bit tongue in cheek to say I'm the yoga lawyer. And it actually started from my colleagues when I got back from India the first trip, just like to kind of josh me and be silly. They would started calling me the yoga lawyer, like, you went to India, you're the yoga lawyer. And I was like, you know, I kind of like that name. Maybe that'll be my brand. So that's kind of how that happened. It's a little bit tongue in cheek, but it's a reminder that, yoga is a part of my life, and it's integrated into everything I do. So practicing law as a yogi, just means, yeah, I'm more aware of the subtlety of things that are happening. I do try to feel the energy in the room, and also just to recognize with compassion that everyone that's involved is a person that has their own life experiences, and that we're all trying our best. And so when we have to be at odds, we don't have to be evil to each other. You know, we can make our arguments and separate it from the person. You know, you don't have to be angry to have a legal discourse. You can respect the other person's point of view while passionately advocating for your client's point of view.
Does that steer you in a direction with certain types of clients?
Yeah, and my law practice, because I've been practicing law almost 20 years now. This year will be 20 years, October 7th. That was yesterday. 20 years,
yesterday, right?
Yeah, yesterday was my 20-year anniversary of practice. So I do a lot of other things. Like you were saying, I met your mom at the farmer's market. I'm selling microgreens, and I have a sensory deprivation floating and yoga studio. So with lawyering, it's taken a little bit of a backseat, although I do still practice a little more than part-time. But mostly what I do now is legal writing. I don't do litigation anymore. I did that for many years, but it's just, you know, after 20 years of doing it, and it is difficult to be a yogi and to be constantly in that litigation field. There's a lot of really strong energy when people are litigating. So I prefer to do a little bit more calm things now with legal writing, and then helping people with simple legal issues like wills, estates, contract drafting.
See, that's where I was getting at. To me, that in my head, there would be conflict with the practice and then the practical, right? What's happening in your day to day and how this swirls around in your head. And I for me, because I have a very dualistic nature, I would fight with myself a lot. Did you find that to be true early on when you were still litigating and then being, you know, doing your yoga practice?
It just gets uncomfortable because there's a lot of pent up energy, and people's lives are on the line, not literally, but people really take their legal issues very personally and can get very emotionally involved. And it can be emotionally draining, especially if you're aware of energies and sensitive like I am. It just can start to drain you and feel not good. So, but I do think it's important that we have more attorneys that are aware and compassionate. So it's a balance. It's not that it's impossible to do both. It's just, for me, I started to be more interested in other things and to not want to go into those environments, even though I think I was helpful, you know, to bring a more uplifted presence into those environments can really help move things, but it can also be draining on you physically when nobody else is on that same page.
I totally understand that. I feel that immensely. For myself, you know, I deal with people all day long, and I sometimes take on their stuff. And I have people say, well, sage yourself, drink water, do all these things, sit in the sun, try to heal yourself. I took a class called Heal the Healer back in the day. And I have all these techniques, but sometimes you just have to step away for a little while and regroup and get your energy back. So we didn't actually talk about talking about this, but I wanted to ask you, end it on a note this way, because we have a couple minutes left, like 2 minutes.
Sure.
Talk about Zen Float. Talk about what sensory deprivation is like, and I'll give people a quick heads up. So Kelli has a company or a brick and mortar called Zen Float, right? Zen Float.
Total Zen Float.
And it's basically a sensory deprivation brick and mortar store where you can go and you can get into a tank and you can basically do a sensory deprivation experience. Can you tell us what that's like for some people or for you?
Yeah, so it goes hand in hand with yoga. It is its own yoga, and it's sensory deprivation floating. If you haven't heard of it, it's basically, it looks kind of like a hot tub with a lid on it, and it's filled with 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt and 200 gallons of water, and the water is heated to skin temperature, and the environment is dark and quiet, so that you can really go inward and completely relax. The Epsom salt has numerous physical benefits that have been known for centuries or thousands of years even. So you get a really good physical benefit from that, the water being so saturated with Epsom salt. But because of the sensory deprivation aspect, you know, all your senses are muted, your sight, touch, even because the water feels like your skin because it's the same temperature, your hearing. So you really get a chance to go inward, and it can be very helpful for meditating. You can bring a meditation practice in there. But even if you're not a regular meditator, people experience deep relaxation and pain relief and relief from other chronic conditions from floating. So it's kind of, it runs the gamut for physical, spiritual, mental type healing. And I own a center that has 2 of those flotation tanks. So you can come and bring a friend. And then we also have a yoga studio. So we offer yoga classes in the yoga room.
And
it's like a place of spiritual, like a spiritual center is what I
And
think
your
of it.
website is?
TheYogaLawyer.com.
Fabulous. And I just wanted to say in closing, if you like what you see, you like what you've heard, you can like and subscribe to this channel. I'm also on Rumble, and my producer would kill me if I didn't say that. So I had to say all those things. I'll probably forget sometimes, but I'll get better at it. And Kelli, I really appreciate you and your time. And one last thing, Rotten Minerva is on Amazon, right? People can go pick up the book.
Yep. It's available all major booksellers, and you can also get it from my website.
Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you.